speaks of that sacred moment when a person crosses from earthly life into the presence of Christ. A moment so profound, so overwhelming, that language struggles to hold its weight. When the breath leaves the body and the heartbeat slows into silence, there is no fear, no confusion, no chaos. Instead, there is an almost indescribable stillness, as if time itself stops to honor the transition. Everything that once felt heavy suddenly becomes light. The noise of the world fades, the burdens fall away, and the soul begins to awaken to a reality far more vivid than anything ever seen through human eyes. In that instant, the separation between the physical and the spiritual dissolves, and the spirit is drawn upward, not by force, but by an irresistible peace that feels like being carried by the gentlest hands. As the earthly realm grows dim, another dimension begins to open, one filled with a purity that makes every earthly color seem dull in comparison. The presence of God is not something you search for. It surrounds you completely, pouring into you like warmth after a cold night. The love that fills this place is not emotional, not momentary, it is absolute. It washes through you until every fear, every regret, every hidden pain is embraced by a love so complete that you finally understand why heaven is called glorious. The nearness of Christ becomes unmistakable. Even before seeing Him fully, you feel Him. His compassion, His authority, His holiness. It is as though every longing you carried throughout your life suddenly finds its fulfillment in His presence. This crossing is not chaotic or frightening. Instead, it brings a clarity that the living rarely experience. The spirit begins to recognize things it always knew but forgot while living on earth. There is an awareness of divine truth, an understanding of eternal purpose, and a sense of being known in a way deeper than you ever knew yourself. It is the moment when the soul realizes it was never meant for the temporary comforts and struggles of this world. It was created for divine fellowship. In this encounter, every question about God's love becomes irrelevant, for His love is no longer a concept. It is an atmosphere, a reality that holds you completely. The transition also brings an unmistakable awareness of Jesus Himself. His presence is not distant or symbolic, it is near and alive. When the soul stands in His light, it senses His tenderness and His strength, His glory and His humility. There is no condemnation, only an invitation to draw near. In the radiance of His presence, you understand that He has been with you all along, every moment, every breath, every prayer. The earthly journey suddenly makes sense as the Spirit beholds the one who guided it through every valley and every storm. This moment of crossing becomes the beginning of revelation. It is here, standing between worlds, that Jesus prepares the heart to receive truth in its purest form. Truth untouched by human limitation or earthly distraction. Centers on the overwhelming love, peace, and authority of Jesus during the encounter, a reality that cannot be fully captured by human language. When the Spirit enters His presence, the atmosphere changes instantly. It is not like walking into a room or meeting someone familiar. It is stepping into the very essence of love itself. The first thing the soul feels is peace. Pure, undiluted peace that settles into the deepest places, even the ones long hidden from others. This peace does not merely calm, it transforms. It quiets every internal storm, silences every anxious thought, and fills the heart with a certainty that everything is held securely in his hands. It is a peace that answers questions without words, a peace that reveals that nothing in life was ever out of his sight or beyond his reach. Then comes the love. Love so strong it feels alive. Love that flows like a warm, rushing river through the soul. It is not sentimental or weak. It is powerful, intentional, and personal. In this love, the soul realizes that it was cherished long before it ever took its first breath. Every wound carried through life is touched by a compassion so deep it dissolves bitterness and sorrow instantly. The love of Jesus is not something that surrounds the soul from the outside. It enters the soul, filling every empty space with a completeness that cannot be found in the world. This love teaches without speaking, revealing that human worth is not measured by achievement, failures, or reputation, but by his desire to be united with his creation. In that moment, the soul understands that Jesus does not merely love, he is love in its purest form. But intertwined with his love and peace is his authority, an authority that radiates effortlessly. It is not the authority of domination or earthly power. It is the authority that comes from absolute truth and absolute purity. When Jesus stands before the soul, his authority feels like the foundation of all existence. It is unwavering, unshakable, and filled with purpose. His presence communicates that everything in heaven and earth responds to his voice, yet his authority is never harsh. It is a strength that brings stability, a certainty that removes all fear. You sense that he could speak a single word and creation itself would shift, yet he looks upon you with tenderness that makes you feel completely safe. In his presence, these three qualities, love, peace, and authority, do not compete. They harmonize perfectly. His peace prepares the heart to receive him. His love heals and embraces, and his authority establishes truth that cannot be questioned. Together they create an encounter that reshapes the soul's understanding of who Jesus truly is. Seeing him in this fullness reveals why he is worthy of trust, worship, and surrender. It becomes clear that his authority is anchored in love. His love is anchored in holiness, and his peace flows from his eternal nature. And in that holy atmosphere, the soul knows it is finally standing before the one it was created for, the one who holds eternity within his hands. Speaks of the moment when Jesus reveals the true spiritual power and purpose of speaking in tongues, a revelation far deeper than anything learned through teaching or human explanation. When Jesus begins to speak about this divine gift, it is not as a doctrine or a ritual, but as a living conduit between heaven and his people. His words carry weight, not because of volume, but because they are saturated with truth that resonates in the very center of the soul. In his presence, the mysteries that once felt distant suddenly become clear, and what seemed like a spiritual practice reserved for a few is unveiled as a powerful expression of partnership with the Holy Spirit. He makes it known that speaking in tongues is not about eloquence, emotion, or performance. It is about alignment. It is the spirit of a believer synchronizing with the rhythm of heaven, praying beyond earthly understanding and stepping into divine purpose. Jesus reveals that when a believer prays in tongues, they step out of the limitations of the mind and into the limitless flow of the Spirit. Every sound uttered in that language is not random. It is intentional, guided, and infused with the perfect will of God. In that moment, the soul understands that speaking in tongues bypasses confusion, doubt, and fear, because it is prayer untouched by human weakness. It is the Spirit praying through the believer, releasing heavenly strategies, divine protection, and supernatural strength into their life. Jesus makes it clear that this gift was never meant to be mysterious or misunderstood. It was given as a weapon, a comfort, a pathway, and a connection to the heart of God that cannot be disrupted by earthly circumstances. What believers speak in the Spirit has an echo in heaven, a resonance that activates things in the unseen realm long before they manifest on earth. As Jesus continues to reveal the depth of this gift, the soul begins to see scenes of spiritual battles waged, and won through prayers offered in tongues. He shows how every syllable spoken in the Spirit becomes like a light in darkness, cutting through confusion and empowering angels on assignment. He reveals that speaking in tongues strengthens the inner man, builds faith, and opens doors that human wisdom could never unlock. It becomes clear that this gift is not only for moments of spiritual intensity, but for every day, every struggle, every decision, and every step of the believer's walk. It is a steady source of spiritual oxygen, keeping the soul alive and sensitive to the voice of God. Jesus also reveals that many believers have neglected this gift because they do not understand its true value. Some see it as unnecessary, others as optional. But he shows that it was given to every believer who desires deeper intimacy with God. It is not limited by age, experience, or spiritual maturity. Instead, it is a divine invitation to step into a higher realm of prayer and communion with the Spirit. And as he speaks, there is no sense of rebuke, only a loving urgency, a desire for his people to use the power they have been given. The soul realizes that speaking in tongues is not a spiritual accessory, but a lifeline, a direct channel through which heaven moves on earth, describes the divine commissioning to return and share what was revealed, a moment where the encounter shifts from personal experience to holy responsibility. Standing in the presence of Jesus, the soul is overwhelmed by his love and the purity of his voice, yet within that gentleness is a firm sense of purpose. He does not speak casually or vaguely. His words carry direction, intention, and an unmistakable call. When he says it is not yet time to remain in eternity, the soul feels both the sweetness of his presence and the weight of returning to the world. There is no fear in his instruction, but there is reverence, because his voice carries authority that demands obedience without force. His eyes communicate that the encounter was not meant to end with revelation alone, but with mission. In that moment, the soul begins to understand that heaven never reveals truth without expecting it to be carried forward. Jesus shows that what was given is not for personal comfort, but for awakening others who are living far beneath their spiritual inheritance. He speaks with compassion about his people, those who have allowed doubt, distraction, and discouragement to silence the gifts placed inside them. He reveals that many have grown weary, praying without real expectation, unaware of the supernatural power available to them. And it becomes clear that the message about speaking in tongues is not meant to be another teaching. It is meant to be a spark that rekindles spiritual fire in the hearts of believers. The soul realizes that returning to the earthly realm means returning with a voice shaped by heaven. Jesus makes it known that the testimony of this encounter will not be carried by human confidence, but by the Spirit's power. He speaks of the lives that will be touched, the people who will hear these words at just the right moment when they feel spiritually dry or disconnected. He reveals that some will receive healing, some restoration, and others fresh spiritual courage because of this message. The soul senses that every detail shared in heaven was intentional, crafted not only for understanding, but for transformation. The calling to return becomes a sacred trust, something that cannot be ignored or diluted. Jesus' presence communicates that he believes in the one he is sending, not because of personal strength, but because he equips those he calls. His confidence is not rooted in human ability, but in divine partnership. There is also an awareness that returning to the world means stepping back into imperfection, into pain, temptation, and human limitations. Yet Jesus' peace strengthens the soul, assuring that the same presence experienced in eternity will continue to guide, empower, and uphold every step in the mission. His assurance becomes the anchor, the reminder that the encounter was not a moment to be admired, but a commission to be fulfilled. When he releases the soul to return, it is with a sense of holy urgency, a burning conviction that what was seen and heard cannot remain silent. The soul understands that obedience to this calling will awaken many who are spiritually asleep, reminding them that heaven is closer than they think, and that the power of the Spirit is already within them. Reveals a renewed understanding of prayer as a supernatural partnership with the Holy Spirit, a realization that transforms the way the soul perceives communication with God. In the presence of Jesus, prayer is no longer seen as a routine act or a spiritual obligation. It becomes a living connection between heaven and earth. The soul suddenly understands that true prayer is not driven by human effort alone, but by divine cooperation. Every time a believer prays, the Spirit draws near, guiding, strengthening, and breathing life into the words lifted before God. Prayer becomes a sacred exchange where the weaknesses of humanity meet the strength of God, and the limitations of the mind are surpassed by the boundlessness of the Spirit. This renewed understanding shows that prayer was never meant to be a monologue, but a dialogue, a flow of communication that aligns the believer's heart with God's will. Jesus reveals that the Holy Spirit does not merely assist in prayer. He becomes the very force that energizes it. There are moments when emotions fail, when words feel insufficient, when burdens seem too heavy to articulate. Yet the Spirit steps into those moments, interceding with groanings that cannot be expressed through ordinary speech. The soul sees that speaking in tongues is one expression of this partnership. But even beyond that, the Spirit guides every prayer whispered in faith. Prayer becomes not just a request for help, but a participation in the workings of heaven, where the believer joins the Spirit in shaping outcomes, shifting atmospheres, and inviting divine intervention. Jesus makes it clear that this partnership is available to all believers, not just a select few. He shows that many have prayed from a place of striving, trying to reach God through effort instead of surrender. But true prayer flows from the heart yielded to the Spirit, where the believer allows the divine presence to take lead. In this understanding, prayer is no longer confined to moments of crisis or ritual. It becomes a lifestyle, a continual communion that strengthens the inner person. The soul realizes that every sincere prayer is received by heaven, even the ones spoken through tears, even the ones that feel small or fragile. The Spirit carries them with power, shaping them according to the perfect will of God. This revelation also exposes how often people underestimate the authority they hold in prayer. Jesus reveals that when a believer prays in alignment with the Spirit, they are not merely speaking into the air. They are releasing declarations into the spiritual realm, influencing things unseen. Breakthroughs are birthed through Spirit-led prayer. Battles are won before they appear in the natural world, and divine wisdom is released into situations that seemed impossible. The soul understands that prayer is not passive, it is powerful. It pulls heaven into earthly circumstances and opens doors that human strength could never open. Through this encounter, the believer sees prayer as a shared mission with the Holy Spirit, a daily invitation to step beyond the natural limits and into supernatural partnership. The soul comes to know that prayer is where divine mysteries unfold, where strength is renewed, and where the believer learns to hear God's voice with clarity.